The Pittsburgh Steelers are no strangers to bold decisions. Over the decades, the organization has built a reputation for both loyalty and pragmatism. When it comes to iconic players who define the franchise's identity, the Steelers have historically shown a strong inclination to stand by them. That's what makes the current situation with TJ Watt so unusual, and potentially transformative for both Pittsburgh and whichever team might be brave enough to make a move for one of the most dominant edge rushers in the NFL today. As the 2025 season approaches, whispers have grown louder, rumors more persistent, and scenarios more plausible. The question no longer seems to be if TJ Watt might be traded, but how far the Steelers are willing to go to prepare for life after him. TJ Watt, a former Defensive Player of the Year and widely regarded as one of the most complete linebackers in football, is entering a complicated chapter of his career. At 30 years old, he is at the intersection of experience and performance, with enough elite seasons behind him to establish a legacy and, arguably, several peak years still ahead. He is also navigating a tense contract negotiation with the Pittsburgh front office. Although both sides have publicly maintained optimism about reaching a deal, the longer the stalemate continues, the more plausible it becomes that the Steelers will explore trade possibilities, either as a contingency or a strategic shift in their long-term team-building philosophy. One proposal that has stirred debate comes from Pittsburgh sports radio personality Andrew Filipponi of 93.7 The Fan. On social media, Filipponi presented a hypothetical deal that would send TJ Watt to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for second-year edge rusher Nolan Smith and a third-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, via the New York Jets. At first glance, the trade may seem lopsided. Watt is a perennial Pro Bowler and one of the most feared defenders in the league, while Smith is still largely unproven, with flashes of brilliance but an inconsistent track record so far. But when examined through the lens of long-term value, salary cap implications, and team dynamics, the idea begins to carry a surprising amount of weight. Smith, at 24, is entering just his third season in the NFL. He is young, hungry, and already boasts a Super Bowl ring from his rookie campaign with the Eagles. His physical traits, elite burst off the line, flexibility, and football IQ, make him one of the more intriguing young pass rushers in the league. He started 10 games last season, notching 6.5 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. It's not an all-pro resume, but it's a foundation. And it's exactly the kind of upside-heavy profile that teams covet when faced with the possibility of transitioning away from a high-salaried veteran. Pittsburgh, for its part, finds itself in the midst of a youth movement on defense. The line is already anchored by rising talents such as Keanu Benton and Alex Highsmith, with players like Derek Harmon offering glimpses of potential that could blossom in the right environment. If Watt were to be traded, the Steelers would not be getting the core of their defense, they would be accelerating a retooling process that has been quietly underway for 2 seasons now. Swapping Watt for a player like Smith would undoubtedly downgrade the pass rush in the short term, but it could also create a more cohesive and financially sustainable unit over the next 5 years. Still, this is TJ Watt. This is a man who, over the past 7 seasons, has become synonymous with Pittsburgh Steelers football. Trading him is not just a personnel decision, it's a cultural one. Watt is a locker-room leader, a tireless competitor, and a cornerstone of everything the Steelers have built since drafting him in the first round of the 2017 NFL Draft. Letting him go would require not only a compelling return in terms of draft capital and young talent, but also a philosophical commitment to moving on from a player who has been the face of the franchise's defensive identity. And yet, there's a case to be made that this may be the right time. Watt's contract demands are reportedly steep, and given the increasing financial burden of retaining high-profile veterans in an era of salary cap volatility, the Steelers may see a narrow window to convert an elite player into multiple assets. With their quarterback situation still in flux and the offense undergoing structural changes, there's an argument that the Steelers should be looking 2 to 3 years down the line, not just at 2025. In that context, acquiring a 24-year-old pass rusher with a rookie deal and a third-round pick begins to look like a more forward-thinking investment than doubling down on a 30-year-old star with expensive extension requirements. For the Eagles, the trade would be a blockbuster in the truest sense of the word. Philadelphia has never been shy about making bold moves, particularly under general manager Howie Roseman, who has built a reputation for wheeling and dealing his way to contention. Adding TJ Watt would instantly elevate an already formidable defensive front, giving the team yet another weapon to terrorize opposing quarterbacks. With Watt on one side and Haason Reddick on the other, the Eagles could create one of the most feared pass-rushing duos in recent NFL history. It's also worth noting that Watt's arrival would bring a championship pedigree and a relentless mindset to a locker room still smarting from recent playoff disappointments. Philadelphia has the offensive firepower, the coaching, and the infrastructure to make a Super Bowl run, but shoring up the defense, especially at the edge position, might be the final piece. In that sense, the cost of Nolan Smith and a third-round pick is more than just palatable, it's enticing. What could be the missing link between being a playoff team and being a title favorite? The deal would also serve as a philosophical contrast between the two franchises. While the Eagles pursue win-now aggressiveness, the Steelers would be embracing a slower, methodical climb back to prominence. It's a risky proposition, but not an unfamiliar one. The NFL is increasingly shaped by franchises that either push all their chips in or hold back to develop a core over time. Rarely do teams succeed in staying on both tracks. The proposed trade would thus symbolize a fork in the road, two organizations choosing opposite paths based on their timelines and internal evaluations. Of course, none of this is certain. Trades like these don't often happen in the NFL, where loyalty, brand identity, and internal politics frequently override logic or pragmatism. It's easy to speculate, but harder to execute. What would need to approve the move? Smith's camp would need to feel comfortable with a reset in Pittsburgh, and both front offices would have to agree on value, timing, and structure. The presence of draft picks, contract clauses, injury protections, and post-trade cap management only adds to the complexity. And yet, all signs point to this being a conversation worth having. The NFL has shifted toward a model that rewards decisiveness. Gone are the days of slow rebuilds and indefinite loyalty. The most successful teams are those that act with clarity and conviction. For the Steelers, a trade involving TJ Watt would be painful, but possibly necessary. For the Eagles, it would be expensive, but potentially game-changing. One cannot ignore the psychological implications for both teams. For Pittsburgh fans, seeing Watt in another jersey would be akin to watching Troy Polamalu or James Harrison suiting up for a rival, an emotional blow that transcends XS and OS. It would mark the end of an era and the beginning of something unproven. For Philadelphia, however, it would represent the kind of acquisition that sends a message to the league: we're not just trying to compete, we're trying to dominate. At the end of the day, the idea remains speculative. But like all good speculation, it forces both organizations to reckon with who they are, what they value, and how far they're willing to go to reach their goals. The clock is ticking, and decisions must be made. Whether TJ Watt stays or goes will not just impact one roster, it could reshape the balance of power in the NFL. And if the trade does happen, if Pittsburgh parts with its defensive leader and Philadelphia welcomes a new force of nature into its fold, one thing is certain: the ripples will be felt far beyond the confines of these two teams. It will be a statement about the future of football, about risk, reward, and the courage to make the kind of move that changes everything.